Angelo Ruggiero's story begins in the shadows of New York City, where loyalty and betrayal danced a deadly waltz. When people discuss John Gotti, the infamous Dapper Don, they envision sharp suits, defiant courthouse smirks, and headlines that captivated America. But behind Gotti's meteoric ascent stood someone less polished, more volatile, and ultimately more dangerous: his closest friend and associate, Angelo Ruggiero. Gotti's empire rose with Angelo at his side, sometimes elevating him to new heights, other times threatening to drag him into the abyss. But who was Angelo Ruggiero? To understand the man, we must return to where it all started. Angelo's lineage traced back to Naples, Italy, though unlike many mafia narratives, his father maintained no connections to organized crime. He lived honestly, laboring to secure his family's American dream. However, criminal blood flowed through other branches of the Ruggiero family tree. Angelo's maternal uncle was Aniello Neil Della Croce, a name destined for mob legend. Della Croce would ascend to become the feared underboss of the Gambino crime family. For young Angelo, having Neil Della Croce as an uncle meant crime wasn't merely a neighborhood temptation, it was embedded in his DNA. The family connections extended further. Angelo's brother Salvatore would later amass wealth through heroin trafficking, while his nephew Salvatore Jr. eventually joined the next generation of mobsters alongside his cousins. The boundary between family and organized crime dissolved early for Angelo and never reformed. Born July 29, 1940, in Brooklyn, Angelo grew up where crime wasn't just tempting, it was almost inevitable. There, fate introduced him to another boy who would become both his dearest friend and criminal partner, John Gotti. They met at 12, and from that moment, became inseparable. Education quickly lost its appeal. Books and classrooms couldn't compete with the intoxicating street life beckoning outside. Angelo and John, restless and ambitious, abandoned school for the streets. Together, they joined Peter Gotti, John's older brother, in the Fulton Rockaway Street Gang, a crew of young delinquents surviving on theft and hustle. Their crimes began modestly: car theft, shoplifting, fencing stolen goods. But these weren't boys content with background roles. Both Angelo and John possessed natural magnetism that attracted followers and commanded respect. Soon, the two friends became the gang's driving force. John Gotti often assumed undisputed leadership, while Angelo ensured he remained close behind. They operated like a two-man show, John issuing orders, Angelo reinforcing them, both commanding unwavering loyalty from neighborhood kids. Even then, their defining traits were evident: Gotti's audacity, Angelo's unpredictability. That volatility earned Angelo a lifelong nickname, Quack Quack. Some attributed it to his awkward, duck-like waddle. Others insisted it stemmed from his mouth. He simply never stopped talking. His endless chatter, perpetually loud and animated, resembled a duck's incessant quacking. Regardless of origin, Angelo embraced the moniker like a badge of honor. Crucially, Angelo became John's de facto lieutenant even during their teenage years. Each morning, he'd phone Gotti with street intelligence, arrests, drug movements, available money. He wasn't merely a sidekick, he was an informant, advisor, and eventually, a soldier in John's climb to power. By the mid-1960s, John Gotti had graduated from street gangs to Carmine Fatico's crew within the Gambino family network. Angelo, perpetually following, earned his living primarily through auto theft. But ambition drove them higher, and 1968 delivered their first serious brush with major crime and severe consequences. That year, Gotti, Angelo, and several accomplices devised what appeared to be a simple scheme. Posing as truck drivers, they rented a vehicle and drove directly into an airport cargo terminal containing racks of expensive women's dresses. They loaded the merchandise, confident in their clean execution. Fortune, however, abandoned them. That same day, FBI agents conducted a routine raid. 10 arrests followed, including Angelo Ruggiero, John Gotti, and Gene Gotti. The charges were severe, threatening years of imprisonment. But the justice system contained vulnerabilities, and Angelo and John proved adept at exploiting them. When crucial evidence was ruled inadmissible, prosecutors faced a dilemma. A plea agreement emerged, guilty pleas in exchange for credit for nearly 3 years already served. By 1972, both men walked free. Freedom only sharpened their focus. Gotti assumed the role of Carmine Fatico's right hand, gaining respect and influence while climbing the organizational ladder. Angelo, ever faithful, advanced alongside him. Then came 1973, the year that would establish their reputations. That spring, the Gambino family faced an unprecedented crisis. Emmanuel Gambino, nephew of boss Carlo Gambino, was kidnapped by Irish-American gangster James McBratney and his crew. Despite receiving a $100,000 ransom, they murdered their victim. In organized crime, such actions constituted suicide. You never target the boss's family, and you certainly never kill them. McBratney had unknowingly sealed his fate. On May 22, 1973, 3 men impersonating detectives entered a Staten Island bar where McBratney was drinking. Their plan was straightforward: lure him outside, force him into a car, and eliminate him quietly. But McBratney resisted, triggering a violent struggle. Gunshots erupted, leaving McBratney dead before horrified witnesses. Police quickly traced the evidence. Witnesses identified 2 killers, Angelo Ruggiero and Ralph Gallione. By July 1973, both faced murder charges. That December, fate intervened when Gallione died in a home electrocution accident before trial. However, police possessed more than witness testimony. They had an informant. Willie Johnson, a Gambino associate secretly cooperating with law enforcement for years, revealed that the 3rd participant in McBratney's murder was John Gotti himself. Realizing his freedom was temporary, Gotti went underground, evading authorities for nearly a year. But even Gotti couldn't hide indefinitely. In May 1974, another Johnson tip led to his capture. Now both Gotti and Angelo faced the justice system's full weight. Originally charged with premeditated murder, potentially carrying decades-long sentences, they found salvation through infamous lawyer Roy Cohn. With Cohn's intervention, charges were reduced to manslaughter, resulting in 4-year sentences with only 2 years served. By 1977, John Gotti and Angelo Ruggiero had returned to the streets. This time, however, they weren't merely neighborhood toughs or ambitious crew members. They were made men, officially inducted into the Gambino crime family. For John Gotti, it marked the beginning of his march toward leadership. For Angelo, it represented both triumph and curse. He had achieved what countless street kids dreamed of, but his recklessness, temper, and compulsive talking would soon become the very flaws that destroyed him. In organized crime's secretive world, loyalty supposedly meant everything. But when narcotics and enormous profits entered the equation, even the deepest bonds faced testing. For Angelo Ruggiero, those fractures appeared most clearly within his own family. His brother Salvatore wasn't another street hustler. He had become a wealthy heroin trafficker, building an empire that directly violated mafia regulations. Angelo, despite knowing the Gambino family's strict narcotics prohibition, was deeply involved. Together with Salvatore, he laundered illicit profits through childhood friend Anthony Guarino, converting dirty money into seemingly legitimate income streams. Angelo wasn't peripherally involved with drugs. He was central to the operation. By the early 1980s, law enforcement was taking notice. By 1981, FBI suspicion had become undeniable. Agents observed Angelo and John Gotti regularly meeting known drug dealers. Though they exercised caution, often using payphones rather than home phones to contact Salvatore, the pattern was obvious. Bureau informants confirmed suspicions, with Willie Johnson providing detailed intelligence about Angelo's residence, activities, and associates. The walls were closing in. On November 9, 1981, the Bureau obtained a court order authorizing wiretaps on Ruggiero's phones, a major escalation pushing the investigation from suspicion to documented reality. Agents didn't stop at phones. Tiny microphones were secretly installed throughout Angelo's home, transforming his sanctuary into a live monitoring station for federal investigators. The recordings they captured were explosive. Ruggiero was heard openly discussing heroin with brother Salvatore and various associates. Conversations tied John Gotti and his brothers to debt collection operations resembling extortion. Worse, Angelo couldn't resist mocking his boss, Paul Castellano, ridiculing him as weak and disconnected. He sneered at Castellano's sons, cruelly dubbing them the chicken people. The FBI couldn't believe their fortune. Angelo's loose tongue provided everything they needed, and more. Internal reports described him as reckless, ruthless, and above all, talkative. In an organization built on silence, Angelo Ruggiero had become law enforcement's unwitting golden informant. Those loose lips carried consequences far beyond FBI recordings. By 1982, Castellano had reinforced the Gambino family's zero-tolerance drug policy. Anyone caught trafficking faced the ultimate penalty. When Little Pete Tambone was accused of heroin sales, Castellano ordered John Gotti to execute him, a loyalty test proving where his crew's allegiances lay. But Aniello Neil Delacroce, Gotti's mentor and family underboss, intervened. Delacroce convinced the Mafia Commission to spare Tambone, arguing that drug-related bloodshed would destabilize the family. Nevertheless, Castellano never stopped viewing Gotti and Ruggiero with suspicion. Angelo, meanwhile, played a perilous double game, regularly visiting Castellano while pretending loyalty, then privately ridiculing him afterward. Every meeting, every report carried an undercurrent of betrayal. Tension was escalating, and explosion was inevitable. On May 6, 1982, tragedy struck. Angelo's brother Salvatore died in a Florida plane crash that also claimed his wife and both pilots. For Angelo, the loss was devastating. But grief wasn't his only burden. Salvatore's death intensified FBI scrutiny. Agents examined his financial records, drug connections, and associates, all pointing directly back to Angelo. Already paranoid, Angelo felt the noose tightening. His brother's empire had collapsed overnight, shifting all attention to him. By August 1983, the hammer fell. Angelo Ruggiero, along with Gene Gotti, John Carneglia, Charles Ryder, and others, was arrested for heroin trafficking. One name conspicuously absent from indictments. Willie Johnson, the very man feeding information to the FBI, remained mysteriously untouched. Suspicion swirled, but no one in Gotti's crew suspected Johnson's true role. Circumstances worsened in 1984 when Castellano discovered the FBI possessed wiretap recordings from Angelo's home. Furious, he demanded access to the tapes, pressuring Delacroce to surrender them. Delacroce, already battling cancer, bought time by stalling, refusing Castellano's demands. That delay likely saved Angelo's life. But Angelo wasn't safe. He was deceived by undercover FBI agent Jack Conroy, who casually confirmed his home had been bugged. The damage was complete. Castellano had proof that Angelo's reckless conversations had compromised the family. Yet Angelo continued, digging himself deeper into an inescapable hole. By 1985, the Gambino family faced assault from all directions. John Gotti was indicted under the RICO Act while Castellano himself faced multiple trials. The FBI intensified efforts, planting surveillance devices in Delacroce and other members' homes. By mid-1985, disaster struck. Angelo was caught with incriminating FBI documents, evidence that the Bureau had mapped complete surveillance of his crew. When questioned, he attempted explanation, claiming involvement was solely about settling his brother's finances. It was a feeble excuse that convinced no one. The conflict with Castellano reached its breaking point. On December 16, 1985, outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan, Paul Castellano was assassinated, gunned down on John Gotti's orders. With Castellano eliminated, Gotti seized power as the new Gambino family boss. For Angelo, it seemed like victory. He had been among Gotti's most loyal supporters from the beginning, and now his closest friend controlled America's most powerful mafia family. Angelo was elevated as Gotti's lieutenant, but power always demands payment. Despite his loyalty, Angelo's mouth continued betraying him. Wiretaps captured him privately criticizing Gotti, questioning decisions that eventually filtered back to the boss. In 1986, he orchestrated Robert DiBernardo's murder, a respected Gambino capo, allegedly to eliminate competition for the underboss position. But the killing raised more questions than it answered, spreading suspicions about Angelo's motivations. Shortly after, he plotted an assassination attempt on Anthony "Gaspipe" Casso, the ruthless Lucchese family underboss. The hit failed spectacularly. Casso survived and never forgot who was responsible. Retaliation followed, cementing Angelo's reputation as reckless and incompetent. Even within Gotti's family, doubts multiplied. Gotti's son later admitted his father eventually shelved Angelo, removing him from meaningful authority after the string of failures. The once indispensable man was now viewed as a liability. Angelo's problems extended beyond failed assassinations. He remained under federal investigation for heroin trafficking, and courtroom behavior only damaged his standing further. During bail hearings, frequent judicial outbursts earned him a reputation for being uncontrollable even in legal proceedings. Though released in 1989, freedom brought little relief. Angelo was terminally ill with cancer, his health rapidly deteriorating. Behind closed doors, Sammy, the Bull, Gravano later revealed, Gotti even considered killing Angelo, believing his constant talking had exposed too much to the FBI. But Gravano persuaded him otherwise, arguing that murdering a lifelong friend battling cancer served no purpose. Still, Gotti stripped away everything else. Angelo lost leadership of the Bergen crew, his family influence evaporating overnight. The once feared soldier was now sidelined, weakened, and powerless. On December 4, 1989, at just 49 years old, Angelo Ruggiero lost his battle with cancer. By his death, the man once known as Quack Quack, the talkative enforcer, John Gotti's loyal confidant, had become a shadow of his former self. Cast aside, disgraced, and broken, he had fallen from mafia power's heights into obscurity. His story serves as a stark reminder of what the mob valued most: silence, loyalty, and discipline. Angelo violated all three, and ultimately, it cost him everything. Angelo Ruggiero's life remains one of organized crime's most dramatic cautionary tales. A man who began as Gotti's closest ally became his greatest liability, undone not only by FBI wiretaps and drug money, but by his own inability to remain silent. And in the mafia, loose lips don't just sink ships. They destroy lives. If you found this story as captivating as we did, there's much more to discover in the hidden world of organized crime. What's your take? Was Angelo Ruggiero a victim of circumstances, or the architect of his own destruction? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Inside the Secret World of Mafia Titans, where history's most dangerous secrets come to light.